Welcome to a new edition of the Heat Treat podcast. Today we have not one, not two, but three guests, fantastic guests, power players of the industry, experts on the subject. We got the A team from Metal Pro, Jim Senne, Steve Mouse, and Bill Andreski. How's it going, guys? How you doing? And it's great to have three guests. It's the first time we actually have more than one guest on the podcast. So you have to work with me to get a dynamic conversation right here. So who want to go first? How's it going? Let's start with Bill. Bill, can you just pretty much tell us who Metal Pro is? The team members. What do you do? Today's show, we're gonna talk about heat treat best practices. You guys been around for a long time. You have been into many heat treat shops. You have a bunch of experience. But I just would like to have like some background of the company Metal Pro, who does what. If you're in the same area, just give us a little stands for and who do you serve?
Well, thanks, Carlos. I'll defer to Mr. Senne here because this is a business he started some number of years ago. I'll defer to him and let him give the preliminary information with us.
All right, Jim. Just for you guys to know, Jim is a personal friend of mine. We have worked on many projects, and I've been with him on many heat treat shops, and Jim really knows his stuff. So go ahead, Mr. Jim Senne.
I appreciate that. Well, first of all three of us come from metallurgical and heat treating backgrounds. And in fact, all of us at one point in our careers ran our own captive heat treat shops inside manufacturing companies. So our history is as heat treaters. We've all run metallurgical engineering departments, and we all at some point in time went out on our own, and gradually over time we all came back together. I knew Steve from the 1990s. I knew Bill from I think the 1980s. And when I started Metal Pro Resources in 2007, these two guys were on my radar to join me when the time was right. And for Steve, the time was right in 2012. And for Bill, the time was right in 2015. So we've been growing. We each have our own constituency of clients that we consult with. Bill goes all over the world. I kind of stay as close to home as I can. Steve travels about the Midwest mainly, but we also are manufacturers reps, and we sell heat treating equipment, and we sell everything that has to do with a heat treater shop. That typically takes place in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee.
And you're real experts. I didn't know like the thing you need to do before working for Metal Pro is to run a captive heat treat. So that's like you guys are like in a fraternity or something like that, right? So I believe it's a great background actually, because you really have some experience, hands-on. You know what your customer, you have been on your customer's shoes. That's what I'm trying to say, right? The problems, the situations, budget, change of commands, projects, all that, you name it. And what I find really amazing about Metal Pro is that you're a business consulting driven unit, right? I mean, you actually do consulting only for heat treat, nothing else, right?
Primarily so. I get a little bit of steel industry consulting.
Okay.
But usually it's touching on materials and heat treatment of steel mill parts and pieces. So everything sort of is heat treat centric, yes.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about best practices, right? And of course, there's a bunch of areas of opportunities when you're running a heat treat operation, either if it's captive or commercial, right? And we got the metallurgical aspect, process development, productivity, which it's optimization of loads, utilization of furnaces, energy saving, how to implement technologies, retrofit, industrial engineering, quality problems, of course. But what do you see the most? What are the things that heat treaters ask for help? When they decide to say, we need consultants here. we need experts. How's that approach? When do you think the guy said, you know, we don't have enough resources, we have to bring someone from outside?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll jump in, Carlos and team here is Jim and Steve and I talk about this all the time as we, I think as we've cleared the hump and maybe we're on the banana peel slide now. I don't know how long that's going to take, but hopefully a while yet. But as we've seen a lot of things change in the industry in our industry over the last 30 years or so, there's certainly been in our specific areas of metallurgy, steel, as Jim pointed out, which Steve, Jim, and I are, that's where most of our background is from. There aren't a lot of people entering the business, at least in our specific type of area of metallurgy and heat treatment. The academic side of the world has changed a little bit to a more of a materials approach, which brings in a lot of other important materials, but nothing that Steve and Jim and I make a living doing. And so our focus on steel, albeit you know, a very old type of process, mature type of process. The companies ask for our expertise when we come in, and that's whether we're consulting or selling, because I think Steve, Jim, and I offer a consultative sale approach when we come in and visit a customer to help them solve a problem. That problem might be a person in us and our knowledge. We look at the man-machine method, so we have a vast knowledge of how to do things. They may have the right equipment to do so, but they don't understand the recipe, or they don't know how to use the equipment properly, or they don't know how to maintain it properly. So again, it's a consultative situation, whether it's a sale or pure consulting, but we're there to help them solve a problem, and it may be running their entire shop, it may be running a piece of equipment, or it may be just a recipe for a specific material. Mm-hmm. So, but this knowledge is a fair amount of this knowledge has retired from this industry, and we're doing our best to educate the next generation, which in some cases might be 1.5 or 2 generations behind us, but right now. So,
and you brought a great topic, that it's the new generation, right? There's the common belief that expertise or experiences retiring, and we're not filling those gaps. My personal belief is that heat treat or metallurgy used to be like a black art, maybe like magic. Like 30 years ago, the metallurgist was the one who knew which temperatures to run it and which carbon potential. But now with the technology, we don't need to have you know, that knowledge on every people's mind, right? You can have a database with recipes. You can have, you know, your documentation, your quality system, right? So what's your approach from that? Do we need to have that old metallurgical engineer the way it used to be back in the 80s, or the new kids that are great with computers can rely on technology actually just to make things happen? I believe that's a great question.
It is. I can chime in on that one. What really hasn't changed from one generation to the next is the spectrum of interest and abilities. And so a real key thing for each of us is to find what I call a champion. Someone within an organization that is very interested in learning. They recognize that they don't know everything they need to know. And so they're thirsty for knowledge and a sounding board and questions and things like that. And so to find an individual like that makes our job easier, because now we have someone that will listen and absorb and act and drive some positive things within their organization. So yes, someone like that can be pointed to resources, and then they can become self-sufficient once they understand how to apply those principles. In terms of the automation, the danger there is that When knowledgeable people retire and are no longer available, those left behind need to know what the key performance indicators are and why things are done the way they are and why a particular flow rate really needs to be held within a certain range. And so what we do see in some organizations is kind of a neglect of some of those key things. And it's very easy to see something and not understand why it's important and therefore no longer do it or not pay attention to it. And so another part of what we do is helping people understand those key things.
So now let's come to the subject of today, which is best practices, right? So when a company calls you and say, we have not a business relationship with Metal Pro, but we would like you to come in and take a look at your shop. It's not like we have a particular, mistake or problem in particular. We just want you to come, take a look what we're doing, and give it your feedback. What are the things that entering the shop you look for? What caught your eye? Some people say, safety, maintenance, or optimization. Which are the things that actually is like your ABC on things to check when you walk the shop for the first time?
Yeah, I'll start in on that one. We often get a call for a specific one of those topics that you just raised, equipment, for instance. The guy wants to know, he wants us to do an equipment reliability assessment, which also might be something like an NFPA compliance audit. So we'll go in and we'll look at the equipment and assess whether all the proper interlocks are in place, whether everything is properly alarmed. Let's look at their maintenance practices. Are they doing proper PMs? Are they properly burning out furnaces? Are they properly looking at the atmosphere delivery system, including the measurement systems? Do they have all the tools there that are necessary? And are all those things up to speed and they're being used correctly and on a timely basis? So we'll do that kind of an assessment. Steve's on a project right now, which is more of a broad reaching one, but it gets into training and it gets into troubleshooting and teaching troubleshooting actually, right? So talk real briefly about that one.
Well, this is a situation where expertise has aged out, and so the new guard is eager to learn and did not really know where to start. And so we created a kind of a hierarchy and priority. It's a target-rich environment, plenty of things that we could work on, but what are the most important? And so we've created that kind of structure where safety is a top priority both for people and equipment. And so we've put some things in place there. And there's no shortage of opportunity there, and it's great to have the opportunity to work with people that really want to make their operation the best it can be, and so we can be coaches toward that end.
So you work a lot with people, right? But how much of that, because we have different users on the heat treat shop. We got the operator, the maintenance guy, the metallurgical engineer, maybe the sales guy that doesn't know how to run a particular process. So how much of the lack of expertise or the experience that has not been replaced is there on sales, on the maintenance, on process? Where do you see we have the biggest gap as an industry?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on that one. I think Steve pointed out earlier, and we believe in this concept. We hope that when we visit with a company, if they've reached out to us, they have that internal champion. Mm-hmm. But that internal champion, as you said, Carlos, could be a different person. In some cases, the president of the company or the vice president of operations. It could be the heat treat operator. It could be the heat treat supervisor. asked us to come in. And then I think we can quickly assess in our head by spending some time there and by talking with that champion what the gap is, right? Where is the gap? Well, we run 3 shifts here. We have 1 operator on all shifts. I have a customer that all 3 shifts, the most senior operator has 1 year of experience in their shop. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a little different gap analysis than maybe when we visit another customer and they have, they want us to come in, as Jim said, and do an assessment. So we have to we say, read the room and try to understand what's happening there. Again, regarding, I say, man-machine method and where those gaps exist there. So then once we have that kind of input, we understand where the situation is, then we can lay out an agenda for them that helps them understand what they might want to do. And again, what's the end goal? So if we have an agenda and then want to understand what their end goal is, Jim said it might be a process, it might be a piece of equipment, or they may be retuning their entire heat treat business, or they may be insourcing and want to start doing heat treatment inside. And in that case, it's very, very difficult. So there's many gaps, and we have to understand what those gaps are, and then take a few different paths to help them get to reach their goal.
So what will be an advice, you as a heat treat consultant with many locations that you visit and customers that you actually service, what would be a best practice to keep your people trained and not to lose that experience?
Well, I think it's multifaceted, and you have to evaluate the level of training that's already there. But if you go in and first of all look to see if they have standard operating procedures in place and work instructions in place and ones that are reasonable to follow. And if you don't have those in place, you have to start there before you start with actually training, because you have to train somebody to something. And we go into a lot of places where the written instructions are either non-existent or very unclear. So to me, that's kind of a starting point. And then pulling in from Steve's idea, you have to have that champion. You got to have some eagerness there. And so sometimes you have to do your own motivating to raise a champion up and get them to understand, you guys are doing things that are dangerous. You're doing things that are going to get someone hurt. Your equipment is just in sad shape, and get that person to understand that. And that's training in itself, only training in a different way than what you're referring to. A lot of outside works available are and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend anybody that's in a heat treat shop, if they've not had any formal training, to start there, understanding equipment, understanding processes in general, so that when you're back at your own shop, you can apply those principles that you've learned to your own shop.
So with the turnover that we've been having on worldwide, people are entering and leaving businesses because of the economy, because competition, you name it, right? Because of market offer. But what I'm getting from this conversation, which what you stated, is that you cannot replace like an operator and just you go and operate the furnace tomorrow, right? They have to understand that it's a risky work environment if things are not done properly, right? So I believe that's a great practice. Now, having said that, a lot of shops they're running, and this may be a captive shop, right? And they have other processes besides heat treat, right? And when you have a wider spectrum than only furnaces, maintenance and safety on the furnace, gets a little look aside, because you're looking at plant maintenance, not only at furnace safety, right? And sometimes we will call from managers saying, hey, my furnace is not working, right? Or I'm not getting parts, but they don't understand NFPA. They don't understand, furnace process, and they just think that if the machine is running, they can still produce parts, but they are actually putting or placing their staff on a very dangerous place. Do you see that a lot?
Yes, yeah, we
You,
have,
you don't have to point the company. Just go yes or no, right? We're not trying to find any guilty guys here.
right. No, you're certainly correct there, Carlos, and Jim and Steve and I talk about this subject quite often as well. And there's a whole separate, I guess, as Jim pointed out, furnace operations or equipment operations, and then equipment maintenance could be its own topic, probably for you on a podcast someday. But we visit a lot of shops. Some of them will have a preventive maintenance. Some of them will have operator assisted preventive maintenance, so that just the maintenance team isn't engaged. And then certainly, you know, a more formal maintenance plan when something breaks down or something like that, that's a little different. But, you know, one of the things, a couple of the things that we always talk about is that, you know, typically with heat treatment comes fire. And, that, you know, we're taught at an early age that that's a dangerous thing. So that's one of the hurdles to overcome with a maintenance team, if not just an operations team as well. The maintenance and preventive maintenance, operator assisted preventive maintenance is even better because the operator then begins to understand different things like changing a filter or making sure that a flow meter is operating properly. That might be on a checklist, a daily checklist, weekly checklist, whatever. Many of our customers are using portable analyzers to verify different things like dew point or carbon potential or CO2 during operations. So that can get the operator involved as well. And then they understand when something is wrong. Hopefully they have a champion to go talk to internally and say, hey, we have to do something here, or maybe they have the authority to make an adjustment as well. But the difference between, and as you said, Carlos, in a captive shop versus a commercial shop is that there's other equipment, right? So in a captive shop, they have a bunch of machine tools and presses or things of that nature. And then they have heat treat, and maybe the maintenance team is sharing responsibilities for both. And it's certainly a lot nicer to work on a grinder in an air conditioned room department than it is to work on a piece of heat treating equipment that's in a room that's 40 degrees hotter. The other part is, you know, typically I say at the end of the day, you can turn off a machine. You just shut this off, turn the switch from off on to off. But as we all know in heat treating, it's bake the cake, and the cake has to bake for the proper amount of time, and we just can't turn it off and go home. So it's typically a 24-hour a day job, 365. So Jim and Steve and I, and you as well, Carlos, have felt those pains over the year, but that's what we signed up for, right? So.
It is, and I believe that's great. Great part of the success of the company is that actually knows where to maintain the furnace, because there can be, I believe there are more metallurgists than furnace guys, right? And so knowing the process, knowing the equipment, and knowing how important it is to maintain the equipment is not something that everybody gets, because when they have a lot of machines and one of those break, you know, you have other 99. But in the case of furnaces, it's always the bottleneck.
Yeah.
So that brings me to my subsequent question, my next question, which is productivity, utilization, optimization, right? Everybody nowadays, they want to make more with less things, energy saving, you know, less furnaces, less maintenance, you know, faster, cheaper, and with the same quality. Do you get a bunch of those calls? And if so, what do you tell the guys?
I can take that one. Yes, we do get that. Certainly with the upheaval in supply, there's a lot of demand for increasing efficiency and doing more with less. I would say that the information technology has made it possible to make that much easier. So then it's a matter of applying those tools correctly. But there are plenty of software packages now, both to, well, specifically to optimize furnace uptime and, you know, plan for maintenance and that sort of thing. Even work and dovetail with those systems, really to give the possibility anyway for getting a lot more efficient. Likewise with maintenance planning and PM, just about everybody now has some kind of an ERP system that can integrate some sort of PM plan. So then it's a matter not of capability, but discipline to stick with it.
I got a question over there because you mentioned ERPs, right? Do you think it's a game changer for heat treaters that do not have a software on ERP systems to the ones that do? I mean, I know a lot of shops that they're still running their data on Excel sheets, and I know a bunch of guys that are implementing or they have a mature ERP system. Do you think that's a very big game changer for the industry, Steve?
Yeah.
A lot can be done with a well-managed spreadsheet.
Right.
So I don't know that, ERP as magic is just becoming more common. But, a well-run organization can function just fine with a tool that's maybe not quite so comprehensive.
Do you want to add something, Bill? I saw some eagerness on your face.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Steve said, only because I'll jump on the word he used before, which again is about whether you treat it as a department or it's its own business because it's a commercial shop and maybe it's just one mom and pop shop, or to some of the global people that we deal with as well in the heat treat market, is that ERP system brings discipline in, right? It's a system. And as we talked earlier about a systems approach to solving problems, well, it's a systems approach to running your business, so that the same type of shop order or job ticket or whatever you want to call it, traveler, goes out into the shop every time and it has a different customer name, but it's always in the same place, and those type of things. I agree with Steve and what you said earlier, Carlos. There's still a lot of shops that are stapling a drawing to an Excel spreadsheet or a
that's totally fine. I mean, but you're relying on human error.
That's right. But the ERP system at least will provide a framework and a discipline for them that's consistent from job to job, if the people have the same discipline in using it. So
that technology of data in general, which is prolific now in top shelf heat treat shops, can teach you a lot about what's going right and what's going wrong inside your equipment and inside the process. And a lot of the top shelf software that comes along with furnaces and controls are even managing or alerting you as to the necessity of, hey, you need to take care of this. It's time to burn out your endothermic generator. It's been running for this many hours at this dew point, and therefore it's time to do a burnout. So instrument and machine management built into heat treating equipment, including diagnostic software where you can go and do what you might call a stress test to run a furnace through its paces. And it will make sure, it'll give you a report that says, yes, every solenoid valve is properly engaging when it's supposed to. Every alarm is being triggered when you go out of band on temperature or a particular atmosphere component. These things are being incorporated now into the controls of the equipment. And it's a huge step forward for what you were referring to, which is productivity, because productivity comes from uptime as much as anything else, right? And if your equipment goes down, so does your productivity.
Okay, so which is, having heard that, which are the biggest money losers for heat treat department? Do you think it's downtime or using more gas or more energy to heat up just fixturing or low tray and fixturing utilization? Maintenance, because maintenance it's quite expensive. It's not an expense, it's an investment, right? Because otherwise you're going to have downtime. But what on your experience are like the biggest money losers on heat treat departments?
So before we actually answer that, I'd like to suggest that there are different kinds of commercial heat treat shops. You have a job shop where filling your furnaces every minute may not be as important as it would be in what we might call a high production shop. So the answer may be different from one place to another.
Okay, what's a job shop? How do you define a job shop?
So a tool and die shop where they have a truck that runs around the city and picks up parts.
Okay.
Parts get dropped off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and get picked up at 2 o'clock the next day.
Okay.
Versus somebody that's got a long-term contract to make, up 2 million transmission gears in a year. I think they're two different kinds of shops.
Okay, so let's divide them and just analyze the two, right?
Sure.
So how will you analyze those, which are the biggest area of opportunity to increase productivity or not to lose money, if so? Because on captive shops, if you have low volume and you're running big pushers, you're burning a bunch of gas.
Yes.
Right? And no matter if you're running maybe one rack or 5 loads, you're running the same amount of gas, right? This might not be the case of job shops, as you call them, right?
Yes.
But how would you define best practices not to have money lost on these two different type of businesses?
Well, let's start with the high production shop. We're talking about capacity utilization being a driver, right? And you're doing the same thing every single day over and over and over again. So a good, well-written procedure can go a long way to having a successful run of a particular kind of part. And let's throw it to the other side now, the job shop. To me, the key to a job shop is what's coming in, the condition that it's coming in, and it's going to be something different than it was yesterday. So you have to have that nimbleness to not make a mistake on that particular day. So the processes aren't as well defined. You're always on the go, figuring out how am I going to heat treat this part that got dropped on my doorstep today with no really good instructions. And the guy just said, heat treat this, and maybe not even a specification. That's a totally different set of problems that the high production shop has.
Yeah, and it's there's kind of a term that it's kind of trending now, which is being a generalist against being a specialist, right? Because on captives, you become a specialist running maybe five part numbers, right? And you know all about those, right? But if they switch or add one thing, everybody goes crazy, right? On the job shop, that's like every day, getting different parts, different volumes, different racking, different processes, right? So you need to have a lot of flexibility and response time in order to achieve that. So what I got from what you're saying is that on captive shops, you have to, downtime is what kills you, right? Because you're doing mass production. And on job shops, you have to be very flexible and you have to have a great response time for wherever arrives that day.
Mm-hmm.
If you go ahead, Steve.
For the job shop as well, readiness is a real key feature. You may not run a furnace every day, but if you need it today, it had better be ready. And so, the current environment we're in, energy costs, I wouldn't say they're minuscule, but they can be a very small part of the cost of operation. And so to idle a furnace waiting for that next load that needs to be processed as quickly as possible, it's not that big a deal to have to eat that energy cost because it's a small part of their premium that can be charged for that quick turnaround work. So there, preventive maintenance is key. Well, it's always important, but there, you may have 20 furnaces and you better have all 20 ready, because you know that truck that's making the circuit around town is going to have some surprises on it. And so being ready to turn those quickly is a real key thing.
Right, and it becomes a matter of a financial matter, right? You have 20 furnaces and you're only using for the last 2 years 12 of them, right? And you have to buy spares and maintain them. It's a common practice on this industry to start grabbing, radiant tubes from each other, or regulators or fans, right? Or wherever, everybody does that. I haven't met a guy that doesn't do that. And if there's one, congratulations, you're the only one and only. But then you have to, you got a spike of work, then you have to turn the others on, right? But you have to ask for spares, and it becomes very, very expensive to get back in shape, right? What's your approach as a heat treat consultant, right? Doing this matter, should you invest on spares, or just go and just cannibalize the other furnace while you have it in there? I believe that's a tricky question. But if you have 20 furnaces, on a perfect world, just keep them maintained. But that's a lot of money, right? But if you have 4 to spare and you don't see like a slightly increase of volume, will you take that radiant tube, Jim? Will you take that regulator, Bill? Will you take that controller, Steve? Or will you tell the supplier, just send me the invoice?
I'll jump on the answer here. And
this is a tricky question. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, but there's some good stuff that we can
I
talk
don't
about.
think you put any of us on the spot here, right? And I think I can speak well for Steve and Jim. They may say it a little differently.
This is great because you were in charge of captive shops. I believe this is a great question.
Well, and maybe that's why I think our answer might all be the same. We might just say it a little bit differently. Is that
okay?
That there's 3 things we always have to look at, and you've brought them all up, Carlos, is quality, cost, and time or delivery, or something like that. But I think whether Jim, Steve, and I are going in to sell a piece of equipment, or we're going in to consult, or the consultative sale, as I said earlier in the conversation here today, is that we will always pick quality first. So I think Jim and Steve will nod their heads up and down here, because it's just, that's our DNA. And maybe part of that DNA is our our nature, but I think some of it was our nurturing too in the captive shop. But I think that whether you're a commercial shop or a captive shop, that ought to be first. It ought, to an automobile manufacturer, a domestic automobile manufacturer slogan was quality first, I think, at one time. So I think that's the way we go into that. So whether it's a big decision or a minor decision, like you said, Carlos, so do I cannibalize another piece of equipment here or there? I think that decision, the common denominator in all those decisions ought to be, how does this affect the quality of the product that's going through here right now? Not just to speed it up or make sure we save 2 cents on that part, or $2,000 on that part. I think it's got to be a quality decision first. So that's how the well-run businesses are run, and that's how the long-term strategic businesses are run. And I think that's when you win. I think you win when you do that.
Let me throw a real life example of, you were referring to what we call scavenging.
Yeah.
Oh, this furnace isn't being used today, so we're going to pull this over temp off of it to replace the busted one here. So we've all sold heat treating equipment, and in some cases, within a range of maybe 25 miles, you have 7 or 8 of the same furnace at 3 different sites. And so we made sure that the guys at, in this particular case, 2 captive, 1 heat treat shop, 1 commercial heat treat shop, all within 25 miles of each other, all with the same furnace. They would use the same radiant tube. They would use the same PLC. And so we made sure that those guys knew each other. And we kind of made sure we helped them to know what each one of them was kind of keeping on the shelf.
Critical spares.
So that they could kind of share the spare parts resource. And, and it's not uncommon, even without our help, for that to happen. Here in Cincinnati, I can tell you that at one commercial shop, if a guy goes down, he knows who to call over across town and say, hey, you got a radiant tube for a 3648 UBQ on your shelf? Yeah, I do. Oh, can I have it? I'll buy a new one and I'll put it back on your shelf. Right. And that happens. And it's a good practice.
It is. You want to add something to that, Steve?
Well, a few years ago, I took the step of creating a little informal regional users group for a situation just like Jim describes. It happened to be two captive shops in this case, but they had identical equipment and did not know each other. And they were probably, I don't know, maybe 30 miles apart. And that worked out very well for that reason. And in a couple of situations where, a long lead item that's going to put you out of business for 6 to 8 weeks is a real killer.
That's community, Heat Treat community, huh? Thumbs up for that. Thumbs up. Good for that. I just scratch my back. I scratch your back. It's. I believe that's a winner, right? I don't think much other suppliers would like that, but it's how it goes. Now switching to quality problems, because a lot of times, process is running and suddenly might get like a big quality thing, a big quality problem, a recall from, a OEM or a big corporation, right? And they don't know what's going on. Will they call you, say, we had this fracture on a part that we had, we run the process like this, but we're not pretty sure. Are you hired as a consultant much for this item?
Well, I think at some point along the way and continuously, Jim, Steve, and I get asked to do that type of stuff. And in many of those cases now, we'll assist the customer to whatever level we can, but it's not something we do often these days. I would say probably the three of us did it a lot more 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
Right.
And, so now as again, to use a word we've used a few times today is, if we know who the champion is in the business that has that issue and is looking to again, solve a problem, then we certainly, it's again, not always what we know, but who we know, right? So we might direct them to certain laboratories, or we might help them through understanding the pedigree of the material and then the recipe, and then help direct them in some way, shape, or form. But I'm not sure that Steve, Jim, and I are doing failure analyses much these days, but we've all done our share. So
good. Everybody who has done that, because those are like the hard jobs, right? When a director or something that he's not an expert on heat treat and his team is not strong enough, and they have like a recall or a mad customer, they want to understand, the thing, right? So I have had a couple of those calls myself, and you go like, I'm not a consultant, I can tell you my point of view, but you know what, it's only that. Guys, it's been great talking to you about all this stuff. Do you think there's something that we missed, Jim, Bill, or Steve? What would be like the common universe of heat treat consultancy? Do we miss something?
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about yesterday, I'll jump in real quick and then let my esteemed colleagues jump in as well, is, we talked about discipline, and we talked about having a plan, understanding a systems approach to doing things. And, a lot of the customers that I'll work with that may be non-automotive, that may not know the acronym CQI9, we tell them that is a good tool. It's a good self-assessment tool to help them understand whether they're on track, how far they're off in maybe the discipline that they have at their shop. Maybe they're doing nitriding or ferritic nitrocarburizing or carbonitriding. There's a template out there that exists that even if they were to follow that in some way, shape, or form relative to quality, relative to checking, redundancy in checking, helping them put that data in the KPI format, as Steve pointed out earlier, the CQI9 tool. We're not here to promote that tool today, but it's a good template and a good tool for the small job shop, or certainly the large heat treater that may not be automotive. The automotive people must be using it. It's really a requirement for them, but the non-automotive people, it's a good tool for them to use as well.
Thank you, and I believe that's great value for the non-automotive job shops that are here in this podcast. Anything on your mind, Jim?
No, that's a really good point that Bill made, but we talked about a lot of things today. We could probably talk for another 6 hours and maybe bore your audience a little bit. So.
Well, no problem. We'll make a second podcast. And so just to close, and I really would like your answer on this one before closing the show. What do you think are going to be the biggest challenge right now for the heat treat industry or for the heat treat companies? We have done other podcasts, about additive manufacturing, electric vehicle, energy savings, this and this and this and that. But you as consultants, that you see many types of shops, job shops, captive shops, different processes, different markets. What do you think as an industry, which is our biggest challenge that it's coming? And I would like to just start with Steve, then Jim, and then with Bill, just to close the technical part of the show. So what do you think it's our challenge, Steve?
I think it's the people. Among the three of us and probably a lot of our peers, we ask very similar questions everywhere we go. Do you have the people that you need? Can you retain people? And how do you what do you do to train them and retain them? And you can put all kinds of systems in place, but if you don't have the horses to run them, that's a real challenge. And so our industry, the business world in general has changed a lot. And so that I think is a real key thing. And so we do a fair amount of hand holding with customers, getting new people up to speed, that sort of thing. But sure, there are plenty of changes coming along in technology, electric vehicles, and all of the things that come with that. But regardless of what we'll be doing 10 years from now, it will still involve people. And so that really needs to be a focus.
Got it. Jim, biggest challenge for the heating industry?
Yeah, well, people. That is the challenge. And, equipment is improving and controls are improving and things like that, but people are getting more and more scarce in terms of people that are willing to learn. And to me, it's an opportunity for a young person as well, because wow, it's got a wide open opportunity here. So I would encourage somebody, if he's starting out in a heat treat shop, to see the opportunity that's there to grow in the business and become a leader in the business. And how do you do that? Well, part of what we try to do is motivate these guys. And if I were going to give them some advice, I'd say, number one, get in and roll up your sleeves and get a little bit dirty and get an understanding of what's under the hood in these furnaces. If you open up a control panel, you should be able to look at what's in there and identify where the PLC is and identify, where the fuses are and identify those kinds of things, or go and look at a gas train and be able to tell whether it's NFPA compliant or not by looking at the different components. And, just grow and become kind of like the local expert. It's not going to be very hard for you to get to the top, because there's a lot of guys that just want to go home at 3 o'clock. So it's kind of preaching to the young guys coming up, but I think it's great opportunity for somebody.
Mr. Andreski, biggest challenge of the heater industry?
Yes, sir. Well, I'll certainly pile on a little bit just for 10 seconds on what Jim and Steve said. People, process, equipment. So in that order, right? The equipment's easy. The process isn't so easy, but certainly the people might be the most difficult thing. But I'm going to go up to 30,000 feet right now, just quickly, and say, with the change in, and not make this a political statement, but it is what it is. The things changed a little bit in the previous administration here, and is kind of changing still with our current administration, such that the insourcing or resourcing has become a huge issue. And that's a real thing. It's a real thing with customers the three of us are dealing with, as well as other colleagues that we work with, whereby sourcing in Asia is getting pulled back and brought back into the United States, or at least into North America, we can say. So that is a huge challenge. And one of the biggest challenges is people, back to that common denominator. But also the people that are there, can they do that? But how do we add people? I'll just close by saying, my wife and I drove through the Industrial Parkway just the other day, and she goes, wow, every building had a help wanted sign. Well, if we drive down the main road past McDonald's and Burger King, they do too. And if we go by the mall at JCPenney, and maybe I'm dating myself here, but those stores, or Kohl's and Target, are looking for people too. So there's huge pressure back to the denominator of people. And it's going to be really hard for what the four of us do every day and our colleagues to support the efforts of resourcing or the insourcing efforts. It's obviously a great opportunity for us all, but it's going to be a huge challenge for us as we continue down this path. We had globalization was the big thing maybe 20 years ago, and now it's kind of, are we pulling it back in, and how easy is it going to be to do that? Probably as difficult as it was to figure out how to go across the pond, it's going to be as difficult to bring it back across the pond. So.
Thank you so much, Bill, just for sharing that. And you guys just made me thought about something. You're expressing that there's the experiences retiring, and we're not recovering it, or we're not replacing that. And I see a bunch of white hair in all of you guys. So where's your younger guy?
Oh, we have a fourth member of our team, actually.
Why isn't he here? I mean, if we're talking about that, we should have the elder with the wisdom, right? And I also would like to talk to the millennial or the 3-year-old guy. That what brings balance. So tell him I'm super eager to do a podcast with him and talk about my millennial stuff if so. Guys,
Carlos, we have my youngest son is now a member of our team, and his name is Ben.
Why isn't he here?
Jim, because he's in the trenches right now. Like
okay, so somebody gets to work.
Getting grease punch oil all over him right now.
Right.
Good thing. So
I think you got my point.
Podcast with the millennials, and for now I'll stick with my team.
I think you got my point. I mean, if you're saying that we need to fill that gap, it's always good to have the wisdom of the elder, the experience, but where's the younger guys? Because otherwise, when we say, "Oh, I'm 3 years away from retiring, I need to have a heat treat expert in 3 years," that's not gonna happen, right? Guys, it's been fantastic talking to you about all this technical stuff. I had a blast. I wish we could have more time, but otherwise we should start losing audience. The first time we had 3 guys here, a lot of experience, a lot of heat treat passion, a lot of friendship and team building here, teamwork. Now let's go onto the more human side, right? You guys been here for a while on the heat treat business, but what will be an advice you will give to your 3-year-old self, or to the new generation of heat treaters, to your son, Bill, right? What's an advice that or a personal experience that you would like to share with the newer guys in order to feel that you learned through your career, that you learned through your experience, that you learned through visiting shops, dealing with problems, looking at stuff, talking to suppliers? What will be something that you would like to share with the new heat treat generation? I don't know if somebody would like to start.
I can start that one. One thing that's changed significantly from the days when we all started our careers, at that time, most companies were not so constrained on headcount and resources. And so there might be, I know where I started, we had half a dozen metallurgists covering the special process type operations, and we weren't all that pressed for time. We had, if we wanted to, we had time to look into other things. And what's changed, obviously, is that now there might be one engineer covering the heat treat, but he's also covering a machining line, and he's wearing they are wearing lots and lots of hats. And so my encouragement would be to see that as an opportunity and not as a burden. You know, the champions that we like to work with are gobbling up as much responsibility as they can and learning from all of it. And, you know, rather than complain about, well, now I have to do this other thing, see that as a means of really expanding your capabilities.
Great, love that. Be the Champion by Steve Mouse. I love that. Jim?
Yeah, well, I mentioned already about jumping in and rolling up your sleeves, but I think the other thing is for a young guy, find a, Steve calls him a favorite uncle, somebody that you can go to get advice and to have somebody who can mentor you. And that person might not be inside your organization. You might be the only guy standing and there's nobody else that even knows what, you know, they don't even know the oil quench from the water quench, but find somebody, find a resource that you can learn from. There's, you know, podcasts like this, Carlos, or there's plenty of other resources out there as well. Read Dan Herring's books and dive into the ASM handbooks, and the resources are there for a guy to learn, but be eager for it, right?
Cold Metal Pro.
Call Metal Pro.
Call Metal Pro, and they can and they'll get to call you Uncle Jim, right? right. Bill, any personal advice for the new generation of heat treaters?
Yeah, I think that again, both Steve and Jim gave great answers. So I get to go third, so I always got to come up with something different. But no, I'll pile on to theirs. But the other thing is, you know, this last year and a half, won't use the words, made us work more remotely, right? But we have to find that champion. We have to find that mentor. And, you know, I encourage, ask questions, just ask. Don't pretend you know the answer. I was at another customer site today, a brand new customer, 30 minutes from my house. I'm like, how the heck I wasn't here before? I don't know. And, but I learned more things today, and I learned because I looked and I asked questions. And that's a really good thing. When you do ask a question, listen to what the answer is. The old 2 ears and 1 mouth, you know, take it in and then apply what you've learned. If you've learned something about that, to expand your knowledge a little bit. And I guess the other thing is, as Steve said, just quickly, is velocity. You know, there's a lot of change in businesses right now, whether it's maybe a private equity model now or a public company in some cases. We know our heat treat industry is, there's a fair amount of investment in heat treating companies now by private equity, and they expect velocity. So as Steve said a few minutes ago, we had the luxury some 30 years ago of having a little bit more time and having the internal mentor and being able to ask questions to a lot of people. And that's not the same anymore. And, but the expectations is that you're going to make decisions quickly. And that might be a little bit more pressure on the youth here than we had, because we had other people to bounce things off of. So.
Thanks for that. Just to recap, Steve Mouse advice was, be the champion. Raise your hand. Don't be afraid of taking too much. Jim Senne, find a mentor. Find Uncle Jim, right? And build velocity on decision making. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, Guy. We had the Metal Pro team here, all experts on the heat treat business, the heat treat market, the heat treat industry. I believe you got a great team, guys. You seem to work with a lot of passion. You seem to be in the right path. The only thing I'm not so happy is that you didn't bring the young member to this podcast. And we talked so much about, we have to fill those gaps and expertise retiring, but we need to talk to the new generation of guys as well. So next time we have a podcast, please have your younger member here. It's as important as every other guy. And just would like to remind the audience, we are having a weekly podcast with power players of the heat treat industry, experts like Jim Senne, Steve Mouse, Bill Andreski from Metal Pro. We have had already like 25 episodes, so this has been an amazing ride. And we're in Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn. Hey guys, do me a favor and go like this, right? We'll leave the link here. Do me a favor and go like this, Jim, Steve. Do me a favor, Steve. Here's the link. Hit like, go like this, guys. Hit like and subscribe. I was surprised that Jim and Steve and Bill were not subscribed or liked. So we won't post this until they subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you next week on the Heat Treat Podcast.